welcome to yet another edition of the CaughtatPoint Podcast. I have a diehard West Indian fan with me, and me being the South African fan. We've just conquered West Indies 2-0, so that's something that I've really cherished. And unfortunately, Dev here is hiding his face. But nevertheless, today it's not about South Africa. Today it is about West Indies. Today it's about celebrating an unsung hero of West Indies by the name of Ramnaresh Sarwan, a warrior, a Dravid-like man in the Caribbean. Uh, so today is his birthday, and I guess he turns 41, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right, Dave?
Absolutely, Pranay. The little man from Guyana has turned 41. What a
41,
pleasure it is to
41.
what a pleasure it is to be able to speak about Ramnaresh Sarwan, who we don't really get to read a lot about nowadays. Unfortunately, because not an awful lot is spared in mainstream media about some of the legends who really dedicated their entire careers for a country, which keeps sometimes surprising us with dazzling results like the ones we saw in Bangladesh, and then on the other hand, results like what you saw at Saint Lucia, which yielded into consecutive test results. But Ramnere Sawan he's like this diamond which still deserves to be placed in one of the highest orders, in one of the highest annals in West Indies cricket, especially at a time where the team's spiral decline was confirmed, and it was no longer sure that it was no longer certain that West Indies were actually the mighty powers they once were. Far from being the crowning kings of this great sport in the 60s and 70s. So Ramnere Sarwan's name actually brings to my mind a lot of memories. And go ahead, man. Just ask me
So
anything.
you talk about memories, Dave. So my first question would obviously be, what's your first memory of this great Guyanese batsman?
I think he broke into the team in early 2000, and he had barely exited his teen years, and he was up against a Pakistani lineup which had Wasim Akram and this young little ebullient debutant, who we still identify as someone who would really use the bails to mark his guard. He would end up scoring 84 runs in his very first test outcome. So that's the first memory, because back in 2000 he was still around, um, amidst a circuit of greats that were Brian Lara, Chandrapal, Ambrose, and Carl Hooper, of course. What we know about Saban are his dogged hundreds, a lot of which came on West Indian turfs. What we sometimes don't really celebrate enough is the fact that he grew up idolizing not Brian Lara or Chandrapal, but Carl Hooper,
Oh,
one
wow.
of the one of the finest cricketers to have come from the Caribbean, but at the same time, you'll have to admit one of the underachievers of the game, because there is so much that he could have done. And Sawan is no ordinary talent in himself. We're talking about a gentleman with 11,600 plus runs in the international level. We keep forgetting that he even played the T20 international cricket for West Indies, though not too many games. This is a man who has 69 half centuries against his name, 20 centuries, 15 of which came single handedly in Test match cricket. And one of the memories that I have of 2004, as a matter of fact, one of the great memories the Caribbean fan would have of the year 2004 is that the great Brian Lara made 400 runs. But as a matter of fact, it's the very calendar year in which Sarwan scored 1005 runs. And his average was, I think, north of 50 that year. And he submitted
1005. Oh, 1500.
1000 and 1005
Oh, okay.
calendar
Not
run.
bad. Not bad.
And yeah, it's the same year, I guess, where he scored 261 unbeaten runs against Bangladesh, though his highest score is 291. And one fact, a rather unsung fact about an unsung man, Pranay, is the fact that he even batted once for an inning in which he lasted for 700 odd minutes at the crease. I'm talking about his career best test score, which came in the 2009 series in West Indies. I think the test match was played in Barbados. against the stern English attack, which featured Flintoff and the likes of the great Jimmy Anderson. And this man leads the game to a draw, but only at the back of a single-handed 291, right? And I think the entire team total that time of the West Indies was 749 for 9 declared. So it also happens to be the second highest ever team total made by the Caribbean side.
So, Dave, this brings me to a question. So what do you think is the Windies batters' fascination to score high against England? Because Brian Lara scored a 400 against them, and then you said Ramnaresh Sarwan has scored a 291. So,
Yeah, 291. Yeah,
so what's the
291.
fascination to grind the English bowlers? Can you dwell a bit on
I
that?
don't know. I don't know, man. One of Brian Lara's finest early initial test hundreds was, I think, 152 against England when he was a very young man. And then, of course, we know him
As
post
young as us,
IPL.
huh? 22 are you and
Yeah,
23 am I. So as young as us.
yeah, which we were precisely 13 years back in time. But um, I don't know. It's just that sometimes you have to leave your best for the best opponents that you end up facing. And England at that time had amazing bowlers. In that Lara Sarwan era, there was Freddie Flintoff, there was Graham Swan. Of course, he came a little later. Anderson was there. Though Lara hasn't really played a great deal against Anderson. I remember the battles that Sarwan and Lara had against the likes of Angus Fraser back in those
Darren Goff,
days. And England, Angus Fraser.
Darren Goff too, and Andrew Caddick.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Andrew Caddick with very unusual years. The years went by quickly,
Uh,
but these years didn't really go by that quick.
he was actually
But
a Kiwi who
yeah,
played for England.
yeah,
He was
yeah,
born in New
yeah,
Zealand and then he migrated to England.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's pretty amazing the kind of talents that your favorite nation, South Africa and also New Zealand, have exported to different parts of the world. But yeah, returning more on Sawan, I'm not really sure why, being a close observer of West Indian cricket, that he wasn't really afforded a lot many chances. I remember his last series was actually in Zimbabwe, unless I'm very much mistaken. Even then, he played a match-winning innings. Most of us don't even remember a very unsung fact again, that Sawan even played the IPL in 2008. He
Oh,
he
wow.
debuted he debuted against Mumbai Indians, and he was representing the most over-the-top cricketing part of India, Punjab, the Kings 11 Punjab. Yeah, yes, but unfortunately, he could only make 7 runs of 9 balls or something like that. So Savan has been pretty much around here, and his talent warrants greater respect than is usually afforded, because 11,600 national runs is no small achievement.
So amongst all the run scorers that the Windies have had since they started playing cricket, where would you rank Sarwan? Where would he fit in the scheme of things?
I think for his contributions to Test cricket, um, he should be definitely in the top five if you talk about the last 3 decades of Caribbean cricket. Of course, number one would go to Brian Lara. Of course, Chandrapal. In fact, I would say Chandrapal would be number one, because he served West Indian cricket even after Lara retired. He was there for as long as 2013, 2014. But Savan contributed a lot, and the greatest moment of his career came when he starred with a magnificent 105, with the Australians putting the West Indies up against a mighty, daunting total rather of 418. Of more than a third of it, which was scored single-handedly by the famous Grey Nichols blade of Sawan, and there was his other Guyanese counterpart Chandrapal at the crease, and the highest ever team total scored in the fourth innings. That was a fantastic achievement, and we should also not undermine that the Australians did their level best to nail him down by using not some sugary or buttery expressions, the kinds of which your parent wouldn't tell an innocent kid, but he braved all of it. The mighty Brian Lara was out for 60. He was clean bowled by Stuart McGill, I suppose, but Sawan held the fort. and it was a match reviving partnership in the middle order of the Caribbean cricket, and ultimately Vasbert Drakes was there until the end when the winning runs were scored. So that's one of the greatest Ramnaresh Sarwan memories. What we should also remember is that Sarwan is somebody who was birthed early in the game. He was just 16 when he made his first class debut for Guyana, and at the age of 19 or 20 he was already facing the likes of Wasim Akram, and showing very stern forward defensive skills and exploring the gaps on the offside. I remember his strokes of the back foot towards square of the region that would really light up fans even when the likes of Lara and Hooper were back in the dugout.
Speaking about the Australian series, Dave, on a lighter note, could you dwell on the incident that happened between Sarwan and mcgraw, which has been one which is actually as precious or as memorable as any cricketing memory? Could you dwell on that?
Yeah,
Not
it's a
and not to go too below the belt, but just exactly what happened and what led to it.
because the words that were exchanged actually did concern the area under the belt.
Right,
So
right.
mcgraw was really frustrated. He was bowling a long spell. And what happened was that Sarwan and Chandrapal were holding their respective ends. They were rotating strikes. When the boundaries weren't coming, they were just stealing off the occasional singles and converting ones into twos. It was a hot, sunny day, and the Australians were struggling. And mcgraw just, after the end of a particular over, just thought to rile up Ronnie Sarwan, and he came up to him, and he just said something about Brian Lara's body part, that how it tastes like. And fact is that Sarwan apparently said you should go and ask your wife that. So I'm not sure that mcgraw went back and asked his wife. It was a sad state of affairs because the premier Australian pacer's wife was struggling from cancer at that point of time.
That's right, Jane
It's an
mcgraw.
episode which both cricketers ended up regretting later on and said
Right.
apologies to. But I could certainly say that Glenn McGrath, for all the greatness he's shown on the cricket field, got away with murder, because that's not the kind of thing that you're supposed to say to any opponent. For sure, this was a dainty-sized man. He doesn't have the records which a Mark Waugh or the legendary Stephen Waugh hold. But for his country, he was at that point of time a star, and he was somebody who revived the lost hopes from that batting position. He would really soldier on from the middle order and make that position his own. And he was also a brave man who would never hold himself back. I'll tell you one of the interesting incidents which gave an early indication of Savan's bravery was that when he was only 3 years old in international cricket, at 50 over cricket's premier stage, the World Cup, at under the flashing lights of Newlands in Cape Town, in that day-nighter against Sri Lanka, a game which West Indies eventually lost. He was hit on the right side of the head by a bouncer by Dilhara Fernando, not the most romantic cricketer because his first name is Dilhara, not the most flirtatious one too. So
Yeah,
Sawan actually
reminds us
suffered
of a
from the
Bollywood song, doesn't it? Dil hara re, dil hara hara, dil hara hara,
which
dil
which
hara.
weren't the lyrics which were being given to Sarwan when he was felled by that bouncer. But things actually went to the extreme that he was actually lifted on a stretcher and taken to the nearby hospital in Cape Town for X-rays. And he came back when 60 runs were still needed. And then he rapidly fired 37 runs of 25. He attacked Jay Surya and Arvinda De Silva, none of which were the mightiest turners of the ball. None of them sported the greatest hairstyles either, but still Sawan was in his elements, and he said that I'm not going to let the situation undermine my team, West Indies, which did eventually lose. But the fact that he came back after having a severe concussion, and today at the first sight of a concussion, with all due respect to modern batsmen who wield the protective guards, they are replaced instantly. As a matter of fact, Marnus Labuschagne, I'm not sure if I got his name
Marcus Labu
pronounced.
Sakne is what he's called in South Africa because that's an Afrikaans
Yeah,
surname, Labu Sakne. But from the time he's
one of
moved
my
to
close
Australia,
friends also. Yeah,
he's
my close
his
friend also
surname has
calls him
become
Labu
Labu
Shankar.
Shane.
My
Sorry,
my friend, a close friend also refers to him as Labu Shankar.
Labu Shankar.
So
So Labu Sakne
I'm
is his African surname, and Labu Shane is what
right,
he's become in
right.
Australia.
So, as a matter of fact, this very man, he has some Bradmanist numbers already in Test cricket. So, how did he debut? He became a concussion substitute for
That's
Stephen
right.
Smith.
That's right.
So, Stephen Smith, for all his bravery and his commanding runs in Test cricket, he didn't have to spare much time, and he was taken away, and he sat out for the rest of the match, right? But Sarwan, on that do or die situation, came back and he hit some boundaries. He was also dropped, I believe, in the outfield by Marwan Atopatu or somebody like that. But badi atpati ghatna thi wo. But West Indies lost the match, but they saw that in Sarwan there was like a brave guy who was wanting to face the odds and not buckle under pressure. So that's a precious memory from the 2003 World Cup.
Speaking about Guyanese batters, there's a question I would like to ask you, Dave. What's with them and their fascination to cut the ball? Like if you see Sarwan, he's a brilliant cutter of the ball. If you see
Absolutely.
Chandar Paul, he's a brilliant cutter of the ball. You and me, a brilliant cutter of coconuts. So, why? So I
We
mean,
gladly don't use as a cap.
the cap of coconut.
Otherwise, the Orthodox Jews in Israel would call us for being for wearing the kippah wrong. With all due respect. Anyways,
So coming back
yeah.
to the more serious business of cricket. So, are they? Do they come up on such pitches where the ball bounces and they become natural cutters? Are they bred to cut?
I think it's their natural instinct for domination. You know, it's their natural instinct to reply back because I mean, let's not talk about legends like Kalis, Sachin or Lara. You know, who could offer three different strokes to a single delivery. I'm sure the Kohli fans immediately would say he can offer seven on one delivery, but it's fine. But onto more serious things, I think Savan and Chandrapal were particularly strong on square on the offside. Even if you see that particular partnership against Australia, which won West Indies such a daunting challenge, they scored a lot of their runs in the offside, square on the wicket, exploring the boundary and the cover point, and that particular side of the wicket. And it's just a natural ally of attacking. Like with Tendulkar, you could expect on any kind of a delivery, even on a Yorker, you would find a way to hit it straight. Same for Kalis. The great Wasim Akram has said that one of the great strengths of Kalis is that he would play every ball very straight. Somebody like Rohit Sharma plays every ball very late because he has that extra second in him. But I think the natural attacking mechanism for both Chandrapal and Saban was that they were very strong players square on the offside. And I think it's something which is driven by your instincts. It's your natural reflection, I would say.
They've
Reflexes
talking
rather.
if talking about instincts, I really like the fact that you bring up Carlos in every example. So, what's your fascination with Carlos considering I'm a South African supporter?
Considering the fact that recently you paid me 11 rands to praise South Africa, who didn't really need any praise because their performances already warranted lots of it. I bring up Callis because I miss seeing a man who did so much and never really cared for being celebrated so mightily. The kind of oratories the world has penned in pure admiration for Lara, Ponting, and Sachin. We didn't really spare much for Kallis, and it is only when in 2013 he retired after hitting that magnanimous century against India and demonstrating the painfully correct tedium of patience and dedication did we realize the mighty king that we had lost. That that this wasn't just an ordinary swan song. This was a swan song of a legend, the likes of which we would never see again. So I like to And being a 90s kid, I reminisce about that era. So if that answers your question.
We all do, yeah. We all do. And it was only befitting that he scored that at Kingsmead because a king was
Yeah,
only meant to go out at a stadium
yeah,
which talks about kings in
yeah.
Kingsmead.
I remember the fans holding placards, King Callus, all
Yes,
hail
that's
King
right.
Callus, and he
That's right.
was the king.
So, Dev,
But
when you talk about admiration, I would think that even the likes of Chandrapal and Sarwan haven't been put in that bracket of or that bucket of
no,
admiration, the likes that
no,
say a Tendulkar or a Lara Kaman.
they haven't
So,
been.
isn't it time that we show that kind of admiration, that kind of respect to these two gentlemen also, in particular Sarwan, because we're celebrating him on his birthday today, for the simple
Right.
reason that he's given so much to the West Indian cricket. And yeah, that's precisely the reason we should be showing that kind of appreciation. What do you think?
Absolutely. If you browse YouTube, the entirety of YouTube doesn't have a single ICC made video, even a 2 minute video, which would capture. You have those show reels nowadays that have become very famous.
That's right.
Um, the countless of which we have seen for the so-called World Test Championship final, which deserves to be renamed the weather impacted final. There hasn't even been a 2 minute reel by the ICC to honor a man who kept the West Indian flag, fluttering high at a time when even the great Brian Lara had retired. Because and this is Chandrapal, who's played for a decade and a half, right? So it's no ordinary achievement. It's a tribute to his longevity, but at the same time, it's a career which was painfully allowed to just disappear into the unknown, because there's lots which he could have still offered. Yes, he had put on an extra bit of weight, and that's a fact. If you saw matches around 2010 and 11, you would get to see that Sarwan was flaunting a heavier frame, but all the shots were there in the books. My question is, if today, and Chris Gale is a legend and we can't question his reputation, nor we must, nor should we rather. If Gale is continued to play well into his 40s, then Chandrapal just turned 41 today. Why was he not made a part of the 2015 World Cup? If you do the mathematics, you rewind that, in 2015 he would have been 35, right? Um, so I have no idea how West Indian cricket allowed another career to simply fade away. If it was lack of runs, then he should have been given more chances in the domestic setup, in the Caribbean Super 50 series, to make runs and then come back again. But he may not be an icon in West Indies as such, but he's a king of Guyana, much like Carl Hooper was, much like the legend Shiv Narayan Chandrapal is, and he deserves every bit of appreciation. And if you think about it, there's several players like that. Like VVS Lakshman still isn't really heralded the way he deserves to be. But then nor is Paul Collingwood, nor is Brian McMillan for that matter. That's what I feel honestly.
So, Dave, speaking about these unsung heroes, these legends in their own right, could you give us a legendary closing that could celebrate these people the way they deserve?
The touch of their greatness was such that it would increase the barometer of greatness itself.
How?
that
Could
that's
you
all I
repeat
would
that,
say.
Dave? Could you repeat that again, please?
The touch of
Something
their
very
greatness
deep.
was the touch of their greatness was such that it would increase the barometer of greatness itself. That's all I have to say. They may not be, there might not be fan clubs of Ramnaresh Sarwan. Traffic in Guyana's Georgetown may not come to a halt when he makes a move or when he passes by in his car. But this is a man who persisted against bowlers like Murali Tharan, Zahir Khan, Fernando Vas, Warren, McGill, Donald, the legendary Pollock himself, and made most of the opportunities that were afforded to him. So, a special tribute to Ramnaresh Sarwan, and a special salute to the Guyanese fans and the Caribbean fans whose hearts still swell with pride when his name is taken.
So, guys, this was us with another episode of CaughtatPoint celebrating Ramnaresh Sarwan with the raw Dev Tyagi speaking straight from his heart. Raw
Who
because
still doesn't work for the research and intelligence wing and
he has
analysis wing.
nothing to do with the Indian raw, but there's a
Yeah.
reason we call him raw Dev Tyagi because he speaks from his heart. It was good to have you again on the podcast, Dave, with these nice,
Thank you. Thank you.
admirable words for
Thank
Ramnaresh
you.
Sarwan. We wish him a happy 41st birthday. So, guys,
And especially
please,
West Indian fans, please listen to this episode. Let us know your thoughts, and not just those who are from Guyana, but the Caribbean islands together, because people like Lara, Hooper, Chandrapal, and Savan were unifiers of these separated islands, individual islands. That's what I have to say.
so guys, please like this video, share this video, subscribe to our channel if you haven't done so, and wait for our next podcast, which will happen soon. Cheers, guys.
Thank you. Thank you, Pranay. Thank you.